So this is American Diversity, page 1. All right, so let's begin in the colonial era, okay, and discuss, first of all, women and their roles, and it varied by region. So in New England, what role did women play in the family? No role at all? They're insignificant. Yes, Logan?
An important economic role.
I heard too many men saying yes there. All right.
They played an important economic role.
Yes, they did play an important economic role because of their work in the home. Okay, they're going to be responsible for a lot of the gardening to feed the family. And so they really play an equal role to the man in the survival of the family in New England. In the middle colonies, we have farms. They tended to work alongside their husbands on the farms. But we also had small businesses and shops, and oftentimes they would work alongside their husband in the shops. In general, in the colonies, women have more of a role and have a little bit more respect than perhaps Europe, because in order for the family to survive, the women played a major role. And whenever women have an economic value to them, to the family's survival, they're going to have a little bit more respect and a little bit more of a role in the family. In the Chesapeake, again, oftentimes they're either, if it's small plantations, they're working in the fields with their husbands. If it's large plantations, the women in the South and the Chesapeake manage the whole entire home. So oftentimes all the slaves that worked in the home would be under the management of the woman. And some general information about women. They did have few legal, political, or property rights. Okay. Do you have the paper? Oh, I don't have any more. I don't have any more. You could take somebody's paper and make copies over there real fast. And the copy machine? Do you have 10 cents? Let's gather 10 cents for Daniel so that he can get some paper. No, because you need to learn, Logan. All right, we're 10 cents. We're gathering a collection. He'll need 50 cents total. Oh, you have. Okay, you have it. Then just borrow somebody's sheet and you can copy it over here.
Oh, Carolyn.
There, you have an extra one, Daniel.
Hey, Carolyn has one too. That's why she has an
Oh, Carolyn, you need to use the blank one because you're not going to learn as well unless you copy on the blank one.
No, I write like what you say.
Okay. All right, fine. I won't. I'm just being mean to Logan then today. Alrighty, we need to move on now. Okay. So they do have few legal rights. They're not allowed to serve on juries. They're not allowed to sue in court. They don't really have property rights. However, oftentimes, okay, they would inherit the plantation or the business, and they would run it and be in charge of it until like a son came of age or they remarried. So again, it was about survival of the family. So sometimes women had to have inheritance rights, temporarily at least, in order for the family to survive. Education, again, will be limited for women for the most part, although it will be really important for upper class women to get educated in like art and music and things like that, just like it was important over in Europe at the time. All right. On the other side, the development of the slave trade and slavery. Okay, first off, the Middle Passage. What was the Middle Passage? Very good. Yeah, the passage over anywhere in the New World, really, from Africa over to the New World. Many Africans died on the Middle Passage. Estimates are close to 1 million Africans died before they even arrived in the New World. Okay, a key date I want you to put under Middle Passage. When was the year that the first slave arrived here? 1620. The first slave was brought by the Dutch to Virginia. 1620. So you can put that right under Middle Passage. And was that slave treated as a slave? No, they were treated kind of like indentured servants at the start, okay? But then laws start to be made that distinguish black indentured servants and white indentured servants. And some of those laws are written there. The Barbados Slave Code, first adopted in South Carolina, which started to make rules that blacks and whites weren't allowed to get married, and blacks weren't allowed to read and write, and things like that. And then in Virginia in 1661, they made a law that said children of slaves automatically become slaves. So now suddenly we're definitely distinguishing between a white indentured servant and an African servant. Okay?
What year was that?
That was 1661 in Virginia. Okay. Alrighty. Under general facts to know then, I would put down that by 1680, that's when they started to favor slaves over indentured servants in the Chesapeake. Okay. And why do they start to favor slaves over indentured servants? Very good. Bacon's Rebellion occurs around that time. A lot of the former indentured servants who are living on the frontier feel like the government under the House of Burgesses is not protecting them, right? And so they rebel. Also, the reason there's going to be less indentured servants is that there's going to be less unemployment over in England. And so there's fewer people who want to come over and be indentured servants. Again, next key date to know, by 1750, slavery was legal and everywhere in all of the colonies. By 1750, slavery was legal and it was everywhere. Again, I think on another demographic one, I think I gave you information that in Virginia, half the population was slaves. In South Carolina, 2/3 was slaves by around 1750.
This is on the Did we ever talk about Southern women's roles?
I just said that they often managed the plantations and all like the house slaves. Okay, as far as slave culture goes, we have to realize that they're brought here from many different tribes. So they spoke many different languages and had many different customs. Therefore, music will become a very important way for them to communicate with each other, especially if they don't all speak the same language. Religion, too, especially after the First Great Awakening, will play a major role in their lives. Okay. And their concept of family is going to be much different than what a traditional family looks like. Just because they are going to be broken up, separated. Oftentimes you have various women on the plantation taking care of all the children while other women go and work in the fields. Men really weren't the head of the family because the whites' master culture was basically to put down the African man and demean him so that he didn't have a powerful role within the family. All right. The impact of the Revolution then on both women and African Americans. For women, we have the Republican motherhood, and what is that?
This is where women would try to learn things that they could do around the house, teach their children and whatnot.
They're not teaching their children stuff around the house. What are they becoming responsible for teaching kids about, Jake?
Teaching kids about moral rights and how to become a good citizen.
Very good. Yes. After the Revolution, women were really seen as the moral centers of the family. So society kind of looks to them to raise children to be responsible citizens. They're going to be the ones who are really teaching kids democratic values. So we do see a push for at least some primary education for women. So you're going to see women going to primary school, learning some history, math, reading, writing, things like that. And also keep in mind that during the Revolution, women played a really important role leading up to the Revolution with the non-importation agreements, the boycotts. Oftentimes it fell on the women to provide for their families the goods that were being boycotted and really enforce those boycotts. All right. Then for African Americans, we see a wave of slaves that are freed after the Revolution. Okay, how did some of those slaves get their freedom in this era? Yep.
They fought on battles.
Okay, the slaves that fought in the American Revolution were promised freedom. Tara? Okay, yes, some ran away, possibly during the Revolution.
Did people feel it was unjust to keep slaves in a free society?
Yeah, so what you see is you have a lot of people like George Washington and other people who free the slaves in their will because they feel like it was hypocritical to fight for this free and just society and then have slavery. But what's the number one way slaves got freedom post-revolution up till the Civil War?
Self-purchase.
Yeah, self-purchase will be the number one way they get their freedom. So they have some skilled trade, like they're a blacksmith, they're allowed to do work and earn money for it, and then they purchase their freedom. Okay. Also keep in mind, during the revolutions when we see the first northern states abolish slavery. So up until the revolution, slavery was legal in every colony. Okay, and it's not until during the revolution Pennsylvania became the first to actually get rid of it. Okay, for free slaves in the North, there were about 250,000 free slaves that live in the North in the 1800s. And even though they were free, they were discriminated against. It was very difficult for them to get jobs. They could not vote or own land. So 250,000 free African Americans in the North, they could not vote or own land. In the South, there were also about close to 200,000 free slaves in the South as well. And oftentimes they didn't leave the South because that's where their family was, that's where their home was. And they wanted to stay near their family and their home. And it does become an issue at the Constitutional Convention, okay? You are going to see disagreements between the North and the South over how much a slave counts for taxation and representation purposes. And that was settled in the 3/5 Compromise. And also in the Constitution, the only other issue that's ever mentioned slavery, and we never use the word slave, was to abolish the importation of the slaves in 1807. And most founding fathers, like Jefferson, believed that when the slave trade was ended, which meant we could not import more slaves from Africa, that slavery would just naturally go away. Okay? So, and that, of course, did not pan out the way they thought it would.